This was the first time I saw him. But what happened to you wasn't my fault. At least, it wasn't entirely my fault. What? Yeah, have another drink of alcohol. That'll be good. That'll be good. Hi guys, welcome back to the channel. My name is Sydney, and if you are new here, this is just a place where we can talk about true crime, spooky, scary stories, dark history, or anything else I got going on in my brain. It's back, guys. We are here for another creepypasta and White Claws. The first time we did like kind of random stories. Last time we did like children's shows, like lost episode type deal. And this time I thought that we would do a little blast to the past and just look at some very like iconic creepypastas. Some of them I haven't read all the way through. Some of them I have. They're the fun ones. They're the classics. So I'm very excited to get into it. This shit is really cold this time. It's strawberry. Last time I think I had pineapple. That's like the worst flavor. This is like the second worst flavor. My pack is low. I'm running out of White Claw. I need to get more. So anyway, maybe someday I'll get a flavor that I actually like. Hi, it's me from the future. I do just want to pop in here to say that viewer discretion is advised for this video. With any creepypasta, there is going to be some gore, there's going to be some sensitive topics, and in this video specifically, there's going to be heavy talk of animal abuse. So if that is concerning or, you know, if that makes you uncomfortable, I totally understand. I just wanted to let you guys know so that you know what you're getting yourself into. I will also have timestamps of the different stories in the description so that you guys can skip around if you want. So this first one, the picture is really iconic. I'll put it somewhere. But I haven't read the story for this one. So it is called Have You Seen This Man? I am not a dog person. This hasn't always been the case though. As a matter of fact, I used to love them. I grew up telling everyone that I would be a veterinarian one day. Had that been the case, I'd like to think that I wouldn't be in the position I'm in now. As long as I can remember, I've suffered from constant paranoia. If you asked my parents, they'd tell you an entirely different story. They said it wasn't until I was around 12 when the way I carried myself drastically changed. I don't remember much from back then. However, there was a particular scene from my childhood that I'll never be able to push out of my mind. Something, or rather someone, that has shadowed me for the rest of my life. January 1st, 1994. Remember how I said I wasn't a dog person? Well, there's a reason for that. As I said, I told my parents that I wanted to be a veterinarian. They supported me. They wanted me to be successful. I take for granted how much they cared for me. They bought me books on animal anatomy. They took me to zoos. They bought me various VHS documentaries on animals. They tried their best to raise me into the adult that I wanted to be, the adult that my parents could be proud of. My birthday was in November. I was turning 12. My previous attempts of asking my parents for a pet had always ended in an uneventful manner. They would always say I wasn't old enough, that I wasn't prepared for the responsibility of looking after a living, breathing animal. I was set to prove them wrong. This year, I was fucking 12. I'd been reading up on all those animal books, and this year, I knew I was ready. Once again, I told my parents that I wanted an animal this year. Their reaction was different this time. My father gave me a single maybe, and with that, I knew what I'd be getting for my birthday that year. It was no surprise when I woke up the day of my birthday to a small puppy licking my face. I was thrilled. There my parents were, standing at my bedroom door, smiling warmly. They wished me a happy birthday and gave me a speech about how I needed to treat the dog the way I would treat any other living being. They provided me with dog food, bowls, and a leash. In that moment, I was the happiest I'd ever been in my life. That dog was my best friend. I just gotta say, I don't like where this is going. I don't. I'm scared. The time I spent with that dog was great. I was an only child. Homeschooled. I was never really able to have an interaction with people my age. Not that I have a problem with doing so. My dog, who I'd named Theo, that's super cute. That's a cute name. Oh. My dog, who I'd named Theo, had steadily grown a bond with me over the course of a month. We bonded the way any other kid would bond with his dog. We went on walks, we played together, I bathed him, fed him, and overall tried to raise him the best I could, as my parents had done for me. Needless to say, my parents weren't impressed. Their opinion of me soon changed. It was January 1st, the beginning of a new year, and a new beginning for me. I woke up around 10 a.m., a late start for me. I never actually made it to midnight on New Year's before. I felt like absolute shit. I was greeted in the kitchen by my mother, who had provided a delicious breakfast. My mother's cooking was stuff of legend. As I sat at the dining room table to eat breakfast, Theo greeted me from under the table and sat down at my feet. I slipped him a piece of bacon, and he was delighted. My breakfast was cut short. One of my chores was to get the mail every day. As soon as I heard the familiar sound of the mail truck, I shot up out of my chair. One of my animal documentaries taught me about Ivan Pavlov and his dogs. Funny how I didn't know I was being conditioned to react a certain way to the sound of that truck. I was still tired from last night. I fumbled toward the front door. I wasn't paying much attention. As soon as I opened the door, Theo took off as fast as he could. I couldn't process what had just happened. He'd never done that before. I collected my thoughts and decided to go after him. I grabbed my jacket from the coat rack and ran outside. As soon as I stepped foot on my porch, I froze. Theo hadn't gotten far. He hadn't even left the front yard. The yard's exit was blocked by a man. This was the first time I saw him. The man looked straight at me. He didn't blink. I didn't know what to do or how to feel. At first I was grateful. He was the only thing standing between Theo and the rest of the world. He said nothing. Theo was looking up at him. He was wagging his tail. He panted. It was as if the man didn't notice the dog was there. He just kept staring. I wanted to say something. I wanted to thank him. The way he was looking at me was as if he expected me to say something. I couldn't bring myself to. Without averting his gaze, he kneeled down and picked up Theo by the scruff of his neck. Theo whined. I wanted to tell him to put down my dog, but again, I couldn't. I simply couldn't think of the appropriate words. My mind was all in a jumble. I couldn't move. I couldn't think straight. All I could do was watch. Oh no. This is probably where that viewer discretion advised warning is going to be very important. So if you don't like things with animals, maybe skip to this timestamp, because I don't know how bad it's going to get. I have not read this story through before. The man reached into his pocket, pulled out a knife, and cut the dog's throat in one quick motion. Blood spilled onto the snow-covered ground. He held the dog in the air for a few seconds, letting Theo's blood form a puddle underneath him. The man then simply let go. Theo fell with a light crunch onto the reddened snow. Again, the man's gaze did not leave mine. He dropped the knife to the ground and merely walked away. It wasn't until he was completely out of sight that I could move again. I made my way over to Theo's garbling corpse and stood over him. I wanted to cry, but I couldn't shed a single tear. My mother emerged from the house, surely wondering why getting the mail was taking so long. I don't blame her for screaming. She saw me standing over the mangled corpse of Theo, knife on the ground. It didn't take genius to put two and two together. The scene described itself. There's another fucking creepy picture of this dude. Okay. Aftermath of the first occurrence. In the following months, my parents had forced me into seeing a psychiatrist. When asked why I killed Theo, I tried to tell him that it wasn't me. I tried my best to tell him about the man. I could tell he wasn't buying it. All right, said the therapist with a smug tone. Tell me what this man looked like. That's when I realized I couldn't describe him. It's just, he was so generic. I wouldn't be able to describe him without describing millions of other people in the world. His face was so forgettable. I know I stared at the man for a good 5 minutes. One would assume I would be able to remember the face of a man who had killed my dog without breaking eye contact with me. It was like my brain knew what he looked like, but my brain couldn't translate his appearance into words. I didn't answer the therapist's question. I simply slumped in my chair. Throughout my entire life, this man has popped up in multiple occasions. I may go into further detail in the future, but all I can say is that he definitely exists. I may seem crazy, but I know what I saw that day. I always see him, whether he's among a crowd while watching the news or in my dreams. He's real, and he's always watching. That's creepy. Oh, that's creepy. So that was horrible. Yeah. I know that one's pretty popular. Maybe not the story itself, but the picture is at least. I've seen that a couple times. I can't remember if it's in the Mandela catalog, but I definitely have seen this man in media. Not in real life, thank God. It really takes generic white male to like a whole new level. All right, so our next story is called Annora Petrova, and it is in the form of an email, I believe. The format's a little funky. This email is written to BrieIceQ at probably like a gmail.com. It doesn't say. The subject is Brie, please read this. Brie, don't delete this. I know you hate me, but we were best friends once and I need you to read this. I think I'm in serious trouble and there's nothing you can do, but I need you to read this so you understand. I know we haven't talked since sectionals. It's been forever, but what happened to you wasn't my fault. At least, it wasn't entirely my fault. I know everyone thinks it was, but I would never do anything to hurt you. This is going to sound crazy, but I need to tell you this so that someone knows. It started when we were in the 8th grade. It was the night before the Crystal Classic competition. I was at home and I couldn't sleep because I was so nervous about competing. Well, I got on the computer, just sort of surfing the web and stuff, but I couldn't concentrate on anything. I was just sitting there. So I Googled myself. I never should have done that, Brie. At first it was all the usual stuff you find when you Google yourself. Then I found a link to a Wikipedia page about me. I thought our club or my dad made it or something. There wasn't much there, just some basic facts about skating, what city I lived in, but the thing that got me was that it said I'd won that year's Crystal Classic. I laughed. I thought for sure someone did it just to encourage me. I confronted my dad about it, but he denied it. When I won the competition the next day, I was so happy. That was the first competition I had ever won, and it felt so good. Remember how hard I worked after that? That's when my parents hired Sergey to coach me. You know how much that must have cost. After that, I would check my page before every competition, and it would always tell the result of how I placed. It said I would win the regionals at 15, and it all came true. After that, Sergey convinced my mom and dad that I had a real shot at the Olympics, and that's when they pulled me from school. I skated every day, but I just wasn't progressing the way Sergey said I needed to if I wanted a shot at the championship. I was working so hard and I was skating well, but Sergey said it wasn't good enough. When sectionals came, all I could think about was winning, so I did something I shouldn't have. Everyone was saying that you were the favorite, and I felt like I had already lost the competition. So I made a Wikipedia account and tried to update my page to say that I was the winner. The thing is that after I tried to update the page, I checked it and all it said was Annora Petrova is a selfish little bitch who is going to get what she deserves. I broke down. That's why I looked so awful the next day. I was in a daze. I remember watching your routine and seeing your blade snap, and the next thing I know, I was on the ground and my face was covered in blood from where the tip flew off and sliced my forehead. Then they told me it was my fault because I had your skates in my possession earlier. Brie, I honestly didn't do anything to your skates. I wanted to win, but I wouldn't do anything to hurt you. When they told me I was banned from any further competitions, everyone said I got what I deserved. Nobody even asked for my side of the story. I guess you heard that Sergey dropped me after that. He said I ruined him. No one would talk to me. Do you know what it's like to be ostracized by everyone? I couldn't even get ice time. And then the page got worse. Anytime I check it, it would say all these horrible things about me. I can't even tell you the half of them. The language is so vile. I'd cry every time I read it, but I couldn't stop checking it. I knew I had to do something, so I made a complaint to Wikipedia. I even tried calling them, but no one there claimed to know anything about the page. I was home alone that Friday night and decided to check and see if it had been taken down. The page was still there, only this time it said, Annora Petrova is a pathetic little orphan. I freaked. I kept calling my parents to warn them, but every time I'd call, all I'd hear was this horrible laughter on the other end. I must have called them 100 times until I couldn't take the sound of the laughing anymore. After the accident, the police gave me their phones, and there wasn't any record of my calls that night. I was so devastated. Before that, I was so busy training all day and doing homeschool, I never realized how alone I had been that whole time. I know you tried to reach out, but I was so depressed and angry I just shut everything out. Once I turned 18 and got the settlement money from the court, I came to Switzerland. I got to reinvent myself. My skating really took off. It hasn't been a year and I feel like everything that happened was so long ago. That's why I shouldn't have done it, Brie. I'm writing you now from an old hotel outside of Prague. I'm auditioning for the ice circus tomorrow. I know it's the kind of thing we used to make fun of, but I really want this. I was feeling really nervous and out of old habit, I checked my page. It's so hard to say this, but when I checked the page to see if I'd get the job tomorrow, all it says is Annora Petrova died friendless and alone. And it has today's date listed as the date of my death. I'm sobbing so hard, I can barely type this. But I wanted you to know the truth. Please believe me, Brie. I attached a screenshot of the page so you'll believe me. It's all there just as I told you. I don't know what to do. I don't know anyone here and nobody speaks English. I keep refreshing the page. God, It's been forever. I keep refreshing, but it hasn't changed. I'm waiting for midnight. I don't know what to do, so I locked myself in my room. There's only a few minutes till midnight now. All I can do is refresh the page. I'm exhausted and I can't stop. I'm afraid to leave the computer until I know what happens next. Yeah, so that's Annora Petrova. I've definitely heard of that story before. Again, I haven't read it all the way through, but that's definitely an interesting one. I like haunted internet pages and stuff. That's really fun. This is another one that people talk a lot about, but I haven't really heard it all the way through. So this is the Russian sleep experiment story. Russian researchers in the late 1940s kept 5 people awake for 15 days using an experimental gas-based stimulant. They were kept in a sealed environment to carefully monitor their oxygen intake so the gas didn't kill them, since it was toxic in high concentrations. This is before closed-circuit cameras, so they only had microphones and 5-inch thick glass porthole-sized windows into the chamber to monitor them. The chamber was stocked with books, cots to sleep on, but no bedding, running water and a toilet, and enough dry food to last the 5 for over a month. The test subjects were political prisoners deemed enemies of the state during World War II. Everything was fine for the first 5 days. The subjects hardly complained, having been promised, falsely, that they would be freed if they submitted to the test and did not sleep for 30 days. Their conversations and activities... Oh, I just saw a creepy, ad, and exit out of that shit. Okay. Their conversations and activities were monitored, and it was noted that they continued to talk about increasingly traumatic incidents in their past, and the general tone of their conversations took on a darker aspect after the 4-day mark. This whole story so far, tongue twister, y'all. I can't even speak my own scripts that I write. So reading somebody else's writing, that shit's difficult. Okay. After 5 days, they started to complain about the circumstances and events that led them to where they were and started to demonstrate severe paranoia. They stopped talking to each other and began alternatively whispering to the microphone and one-way mirrored portholes. Oddly, they all seemed to think that they could win over the trust of the experimenters by cheering over their comrades, the other subjects in captivity with them. At first, the researchers suspected that this was an effect of the gas itself. After 9 days, the first of them started screaming. He ran the length of the chamber repeatedly, yelling at the top of his lungs for 3 hours straight. He continued attempting to scream, but was only able to produce occasional squeaks. The researchers postulated that he had physically torn his vocal cords. The most surprising thing about this behavior is how the other captives reacted to it, or rather, didn't react to it. They continued whispering into the microphones until the second of the captives started to scream. The 2 non-screaming captives took the books apart, smeared page after page with their own feces, and pasted them calmly over the glass portholes. The screaming promptly stopped. So did the whispering into the microphones. This is some freaky shit. I'm getting scared at 2 o'clock in the morning. No one's awake and I'm scared. Ooh. After 3 more days had passed, the researchers checked the microphones hourly to make sure that they were working, since they thought it was impossible that no sound could be coming with 5 people inside. The oxygen consumption in the chamber indicated that all 5 must still be alive. In fact, it was the amount of oxygen 5 people would consume at a very heavy level of strenuous exercise. On the morning of the 14th day, the researchers did something that they said they would not do to get a reaction from the captives. They used the intercom inside the chamber, hoping to provoke any response from the captives they were afraid were either dead or vegetables. They announced, "We are opening the chamber to test the microphones. Step away from the door and lie flat on the floor or you will be shot. Compliance will earn you 1 of your immediate..." What? Yeah, have another drink of alcohol. That'll be good. They announced, "We are opening the chamber to test the microphones. Step away from the door and lie flat on the floor or you will be shot. Compliance will earn 1 of you your immediate freedom." To their surprise, they heard a single phrase and a calm voice respond, "We no longer want to be free." Debate broke out among the researchers and military forces funding the project. Unable to provoke any more response using the intercom, it was finally decided to open the chamber at midnight on the 15th day. This is a horrible idea. This These researchers, dumb as shit. Dumb as shit. Why would you do that? Why would you open the chamber? There's obviously some freaky shit going on inside the chamber. So maybe just leave it. Leave it be. The chamber was flushed of the stimulant gas and filled with fresh air, and immediately voices from the microphones began to object. 3 different voices began begging, as if pleading for the life of their loved ones, to turn the gas back on. The chamber was opened and the soldiers were sent in to retrieve the test subjects. They began to scream louder than ever, and so did the soldiers when they saw what was inside. 4 of the 5 subjects were still alive, although no one could rightly call the state of any of them in life. The food rations the past 5 days had not so much as been touched. There were chunks of meat from the dead test subjects' thighs and chests stuffed into the drain in the center of the chamber, blocking the drain and allowing 4 inches of water to accumulate on the floor. Precisely how much of the water on the floor was actually blood was never determined. All 4 surviving test subjects also had large portions of muscle and skin torn away from their bodies. The destruction of flesh and exposed bones on their fingertips indicated that the wounds were inflicted by hand, not with teeth as the researchers initially thought. Closer examination of the position and angles of the wounds indicated that most, if not all, of them were self-inflicted. The abdominal organs below the ribcage of all 4 test subjects had been removed. While the heart, lungs, and diaphragm remained in place, the skin and most of the muscles attached to the ribs had been ripped off, exposing the lungs through the rib cage. Ugh. Ew. Oh my God. This is really gross. All of the blood vessels and organs remained intact. They had just been taken out and laid on the floor, fanning out around the eviscerated but still living bodies of the subjects. The digestive tract of all 4 could be seen to be working, digesting food. It quickly became apparent that what they were digesting was their old flesh that had been ripped off and eaten over the course of the days. Most of the soldiers were Russian special operatives at the facility, but still many refused to return to the chamber to remove the test subjects. They continued to scream to be left in the chamber and alternately begged and demanded that the gas be turned on lest they fall asleep. To everyone's surprise, the test subjects put up a fierce fight in the process of being removed from the chamber. One of the Russian soldiers died from having his throat ripped out. Another was gravely injured by having his testicles ripped off and an artery in his legs severed by one of the subject's teeth. Another 5 soldiers lost their lives, if you counted the ones that committed suicide in the weeks following the incident. In the struggle, one of the 4 living subjects had his spleen ruptured. The medical researchers attempted to sedate him, but this proved impossible. He was injected with more than 10 times the human dose of a morphine derivative and still fought like a cornered animal, breaking the ribs and arms of one doctor. The heart was seen to beat for a full 2 minutes after he bled out, to the point that there was more air in his vascular system than blood. Even after it stopped, he continued to scream and flail for another 3 minutes, struggling to attack anyone in reach and just repeating the word "more" over and over, weaker and weaker, until he finally fell silent. The 3 surviving test subjects were heavily restrained and moved to a medical facility, the 2 with intact vocal cords continuously begging for the gas, demanding to be kept awake. The most injured of the 3 was taken to the only surgical operating room that facility had. In the process of preparing the subject to have his organs placed back within his body, it was found that he effectively was immune to the sedative that they had given him to prepare him for the surgery. He fought furiously against the restraints when the anesthetic gas was brought out to put him under. He managed to tear most of the way through a 4-inch wide leather strap on one wrist, even though the weight of a 200-pound soldier was holding that wrist as well. It took only a little bit more than the normal anesthetic to put him under, and the instant his eyelids fluttered and closed, his heart stopped. In the autopsy of the test subject that died on the operating table, it was found that his blood had triple the normal level of oxygen. His muscles that were still attached to his skeleton were badly torn, and he had 9 broken bones in his struggle not to be subdued, most of them from the force his own muscles had exerted on them. The second survivor had been the first of the group of 5 to start screaming. His vocal cords destroyed, he was unable to beg or object to surgery, and he only reacted by shaking his head violently in disapproval when he saw the anesthetic gas was brought near him. He shook his head yes when someone suggested reluctantly that they try surgery without anesthetic, and he did not react for the entire 6-hour process of replacing his abdominal organs and attempting to cover them with what remained of his skin. That's insane. Holy shit. Okay. The surgeon presiding stated repeatedly that it should be medically impossible for the patient to still be alive. One terrified nurse assisting the surgery stated that she had seen the patient's mouth curl into a smile several times whenever his eyes met hers. When the surgery ended, the subject looked at the surgeon and began to wheeze loudly, attempting to talk while struggling. Assuming that this must be something of drastic importance, the surgeon had a pen and pad fetched so that the patient could write his message. It was simple. Keep cutting. Ew. Disgusting, sir. Disgusting. The other 2 test subjects were given the same surgery, both without anesthetic as well, although they had to be injected with a paralytic for the duration of the operation. The surgeon found it impossible to perform the operation while the patients laughed continuously. Once paralyzed, the subject could only follow the attending researchers with their eyes. The paralytic cleared their system in a short period of time, and they were soon trying to escape their bonds. The moment they could speak again, they were asking for the stimulant gas. The researchers tried asking why they had injured themselves, why they had ripped out their own guts, and why they wanted to be given the gas again. Only one response was given. I must remain awake. All 3 subjects' restraints were reinforced and they were placed back into the chamber, awaiting determination as to what should be done with them. The researchers, facing the wrath of their military benefactors for having failed the stated goals of their project, considered euthanizing the surviving subjects. The commanding officer, a former KGB agent, instead saw potential and wanted to see what would happen if they were put back on the gas. The researchers strongly objected, but were overruled. In preparation for being sealed in the chamber again, the subjects were connected to an EEG monitor and had their restraints padded for long-term confinement. To everyone's surprise, all 3 stopped struggling the moment it was let slip that they were going back on the gas. It was obvious that at this point, all 3 were putting up a great struggle to stay awake. One of the subjects that could speak was humming loudly and continuously. The mute subject was straining his legs against the leather bounds with all of his might, first left, then right, then left again for something to focus on. The remaining subject was holding his head off of his pillow and blinking rapidly. He, having been the first one to be wired to the EEG, most of the researchers that were monitoring his brain waves were in surprise. They were normal most of the time, but sometimes they flatlined inexplicably. It looked as if he was repeatedly suffering from brain death before returning to normal. As they focused on the paper scrolling out of the brainwave monitor, only one nurse saw his eyes slip shut at the same moment his head hit the pillow. His brainwaves immediately changed to that of deep sleep, then flatlined for the last time as his heart simultaneously stopped. The only remaining subject that could now speak started screaming to be sealed in now. His brainwaves showed the same flat lines as the one who had just died from falling asleep. The commander gave the order to seal the chamber with both subjects inside, as well as the 3 researchers. What? One of the named 3 immediately drew his gun and shot the commander point blank between the eyes, then turned the gun on the mute subject and blew his brains out as well. He pointed his gun at the remaining subject, still restrained to a bed, as the remaining members of the medical and research team fled the room. I won't be locked in here with these things, not with you, he screamed at the man strapped to the table. What are you? He demanded. I must know. The subject smiled. Have you forgotten so easily? The subject asked. We are you. We are the madness that lurks within you all, begging to be free at every moment in your deepest animal mind. We are what you hide from in your beds every night. We are what you sedate into silence and paralysis when you go to the nocturnal haven where we cannot tread. The researcher paused, then aimed at the subject's heart and fired. The EEG flatlined as the subject weakly choked out, so nearly free. I was going to read another story, but I think that is going to be it for me. That was a good one. I've definitely heard a lot of different stories about it, different retellings about the Russian sleep experiment. It definitely was a tongue twister for me. My goodness, I can't talk after all that. But a good story nonetheless. So I hope that you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, feel free to like and subscribe. It would mean a lot to me. But yeah, keep being the bad bitches that you are. Bye guys.